comes to a live-action version of Lilo and Stitch, my immediate thought, even before watching the actual movie, is that of all the prospective live-action adaptations of animated movies that Disney could make, and at a certain point they gotta run out, right? Because these things keep making money. Everyone keeps complaining about them, but they keep making money. Even the Snow White one that people don't think made as much money as it could have made, still made money. That Mufasa prequel to The Lion King, everyone probably forgot that they watched it, but that made a fortune. But eventually they have to run out, right? Like when they get done remaking the Pixar movies, and they're gonna do it. You just wait. They gotta run out, right? But I'd have to think, among the ones that cry out for it the least would be Lilo and Stitch. At least among the ones that anyone cares about. And my reasoning for that is that regardless of what you think about them as movies, there is some creative justification for remaking the bigger, fanciful animated movies like a Snow White or a Cinderella or a Pinocchio, a Lion King, whatever, because those are fantastical, fantasy, fairy tale, sometimes epic scale movies, where there's at least a creative challenge involved in, okay, that's a fantastical animated world. How are we going to realize things like dragons, elves, fantasy dwarves, beanstalks, magical kingdoms, talking lions, whatever, in live action? With a movie like Lilo and Stitch, what was interesting about that movie in the first place was that other than Stitch himself, who is a singularly remarkable animated character in terms of conception, realization, voice, design, it's very clear why they've kept reusing this character, why he's basically, in parts of the world, Stitch is more Disney's mascot than Mickey Mouse is. Like, the reason this movie exists in the first place is that in Japan and China, Stitch is basically Blue Mickey. But apart from Stitch himself, Lilo and Stitch is very deliberately a pretty standard E.T. style movie, with kids adopting an alien pet and learning a lesson and that whole plotline, mainly differentiated by being set in Hawaii among a working class Hawaiian family with female leads that always could have been executed in live action, apart from Stitch and the alien characters, of which there's only a handful. All of the characters are humans. It takes place in mostly realistic settings. What makes it interesting is that instead of being in live action, it's animated, and the animation is used to give an interesting patina to the visuals, to give the very ordinary working class background of the tourist spots of Hawaii visuals a warm and inviting feeling, to give the very ordinary regular people lives that these characters live in this world that we don't usually see a lot of in live action or animated movies otherwise, a warm lived-in sense. So like reversing that into just a regular live action movie where instead of having that extra layer of abstraction, no, now we're just showing the more ordinary live action, conceptually less interesting object. That's more of an aesthetic observation. Obviously, the main reason to do this in live action, to do this again at all, is the same reason that there have been multiple Stitch animated series, multiple Stitch direct-to-video sequels. And did you know that there have been like 3 Stitch anime series exclusive to Japan, and I think about 2 Stitch cartoons that were China exclusives? As I said, this character is big in the US and massive worldwide. The main reason that this movie exists at all is to put a live-action version of Stitch himself on screen for a certain amount of time so that they can continue to market the character, get him back out in screen, get him back out in merch, get him back out in the park. And to that regard, the movie basically delivers that. The film exists to show off live-action Stitch. Stitch is in live action. You get a certain number of scenes of Stitch causing hell, doing physical comedy, eventually turning around and being heartwarming towards the end on roughly the same plot beats as the original. And to the extent that that very low bar is cleared, it is cleared. If you are paying to see live-action Stitch, you get him. In terms of the story of Lilo and Stitch, the original being translated into live action, it also clears the low bar in a less interesting way. As I said, the interesting parts of the original movie mainly come from the fact that it was animated, and the more interesting, subtle things that animation is able to do don't really make it into turning a live action sounding premise back into a less interesting live action movie. the more subtle things about the performances, about the characterizations, about the storyline and the world building mostly go away. The other aliens are less interesting, the characters are less colorful. Basically all of the subtle humor that was so celebrated about the original, in terms of Lilo being a much brattier character and more aggressive than you usually see of child characters in this sort of movie, are gone. In particular, all of the stuff where you can tell we're supposed to interpret Lilo sassing back at the tourist characters, basically none of that seems to have made it into this version. I would suspect because audiences would pick up on it in live action and get mad about it much more than they did in the animated one. The plot itself remains basically the same. Stitch is an alien bioweapon that an intergalactic federation is attempting to dispose of. He instead escapes to Earth and pretends to be a stray dog in order to hide out with Lilo and her sister. Speaking of things that definitely do not track as well in live action than animation, the gag of anyone looking at this sort of talking blue alien gremlin and thinking it's a dog, funny meta joke in a cartoon, definitely is a real come-on sort of thing in a live-action movie, but in this sort of kids movie, literally the most problem that's not a problem thing in it. But stuff like that aside, no, it is not as good as the original. Yes, you should watch the original instead. That being said, the story that it's telling is still a good story. The fundamental building blocks of this are solid enough that the basic idea of the two girls adopt the alien dog that is not a dog, the family is brought together by this, the basic message of flawed, broken families are still good families is still a strong message. It still comes together very well. If the most important thing about this is, does Stitch still work as a character? Yes, he is basically perfectly translated. If that's the one thing they had to get right, they do get that right. In both contexts of, he is still very, very funny, and the switch over to when he actually needs to be heartwarming and say the things that make him go, oh yeah, oh, he said the message of the movie and it works. It's like, okay, yeah, alright, that still basically works. Like, it pays off when it needs to pay off. I did find myself going, son of a bitch, that still works. Okay, alright, you got me, fine. That'll bump you from a 5 to a 6 because I still felt it. Okay, good. If you're a young adult of a certain age or you have young children of a certain age, your ticket is probably pretty much already bought for this. There are worse ways to spend time in an air-conditioned movie theater right now. Trust me.